Wild walkers? Raxa asked, eyes wide in awe as a procession of giants lumbered into the camp, mammoths in tow. White walkers, Mance Raider corrected gently, though her attention had long drifted to the towering forms ahead. They command an army of whites, dead men and beasts, raised by dark sorcery, just like in the old stories. His tone was grim, but Raxa was lost in wonder. I understand the situation, Domeric said, arms folded. You believe me? Mance asked warily. Yes. You can't lie to me. If you try, I'll know. Legitimacy made that much easy. Mance's discomfort was fleeting but telling. Is that why you're bringing the giants south? The king beyond the wall pressed. No. I'm taking them to the south to give them sanctuary. A place to survive. A place to grow again. Demeric's voice was steady, but beneath it lay deeper truths he didn't speak aloud. Humans feared what they didn't understand. It was fear that drove the giants and the children of the forest into extinction. He couldn't undo the past, but perhaps he could shape the future. The children, especially, held secrets of the weirwoods and the old magics etched into the ley lines of the world. He would protect them and learn from them. Still, he'd protect them regardless. Magic recognized magic. Mance was quiet for a moment. Then, with a flicker of hope, you know they're coming. Will you help us? No. The answer was blunt and final. You believe in the walkers. But belief isn't proof. A desperate man in a desert may see an oasis, but it doesn't make the mirage real. Until I confirm their existence myself, you'll get no aid from me. And if they are real, Mance pressed. Demeric's pause was long. If they are, he said finally, I'll allow your people, your free folk, into my lands. But only those willing to bend the knee and abide by the laws I lay down. Mance's jaw tensed. We free folk don't kneel. No, you don't. But if you want sanctuary in my lands, then that's exactly what you'll do. His words were calm, but the ultimatum was iron. You'd leave us to die? Women? Children? Mance snapped, his voice rising. All because of pride? Instantly, Demeric's guard stepped forward, swords half drawn. He held up a hand, and they stopped. Pride, he repeated, voice quieter now but colder. Do you know how many lives rest on my shoulders? Over 500,000 souls. People who depend on me for safety, for food, for justice. People who will starve if my lands fall into chaos. I'm not risking them for a group who won't respect our ways. If necessary, I'll send soldiers to reinforce the wall. But I will not allow lawlessness into my realm. So you'd rather have us as enemies than allies. Yes, better to face an enemy I know than risk betrayal from an ally I don't trust. Mance's silence was answer enough. If you can convince your people to kneel, send them a hard home before the year's end, Domeric continued. I'll send ships, but only those who accept my rule will be allowed to land. Mance gave a bitter nod. I'll see how many I can persuade. It won't be many. And you call me prideful, Domeric said quietly. But you're the ones asking for help while refusing to change. Prideful men don't survive long winters, Mance. If your people can't adapt, they won't survive. Mance had no reply. He turned to leave the tent, but Demeric's voice stopped him. One more thing. Mance turned back, wary. I'll accept the women and children even if they don't kneel. What? Mance blinked. Even if they won't submit? Yes, as long as they don't cause harm. Children adapt. They can be raised with structure. And women, they protect. Give them what they need to care for their children, and there'll be no threat. And the men? Mance asked. Men chase ambition, and foolish ambition burns cities to the ground. I see, Mance murmured. I'll speak with the others. He turned again, only for Domeric to call after him once more. Mance! The wildling leader stopped, and gave an exasperated glance over his shoulder. What now? Your warg. Aurel, send him in. I have a proposition. We need him, Mance said, grinding his teeth. I'm not taking him. I'm offering him a choice. Isn't that what you claim to stand for? Freedom. Mance glared, but finally nodded. I'll send him. When the flap of the tent finally closed behind him, Raxa piped up again, her eyes still glued to the giants. That one's so huge, she whispered in awe. Domeric chuckled softly. Never change, Raxa. So, you're saying you'll go off alone into the forest to look for these children of the forest, while the rest of us return to the wall without you. Is that it, my lord?" Walton's voice was laced with poorly concealed frustration. Domeric gave a calm nod. "That's exactly what I'm saying." Walton's brows twitched. "And what if something happens to you out there? How are we supposed to protect you from hundreds of miles away?" "Nothing will happen to me," Domeric said flatly, with the certainty of natural law. The sun rose in the east. Winter was cold. Rain was wet, and nothing would happen to him. He wouldn't take this risk if he wasn't absolutely confident in his abilities. "That's enough, Walton," Domeric said, raising a hand to cut off the coming protest. "I appreciate your concern, but food supplies are low. If we delay our return any longer, we'll be forced to butcher our horses and forage again. And even then, not all of us would survive. I want my men dying needlessly on my account. This is a journey I'll make alone." Walton opened his mouth, hesitated, then closed it again. The conflict was clear in his eyes, but finally he bowed low from the waist. "As you command, my lord. Just please take care of yourself, or Lady Barbary will flay me alive." Domeric chuckled. "Duly noted. Now, take them back to the wall. That's an order." And with a sharp crack, he vanished. A cold wind greeted him as he reappeared beneath an open sky. "Point me, children of the forest," he murmured, wand raised. It spun once, then locked onto a direction. He cast a warming charm over himself and glanced toward the distant point his wand indicated. Part of him wished for his firebolt. Flying would have made the journey far less grueling. Maybe he could retrieve it from his altar tattoo in the future, or find a book on crafting enchanted flight items. For now, though, there was only apparition. Operating from horizon to horizon was exhausting. Each jump left his muscles aching and limbs stiffening. After a dozen consecutive jumps, cramps gnawed at his legs and sides. He could feel the strain, one wrong jump now, and he risked splinching. Still, he pressed on. With another wrenching pull at his navel, he landed atop a snow-capped mountain. He winced, bent over, and let the pain ebb. He rested only a few minutes before continuing. The next apparition brought him to something extraordinary. He stood before a heart tree, but not just any tree. It rose from the earth like something out of myth. Its pale bark seemed to glow in the low sunlight, and the carved face on its trunk wore an expression of eternal sorrow. It stood upon a lonely hill, wrapped in snow, and around it was magic. Waves of it, raw, ancient, pulsing through the air like a heartbeat. This heart tree radiated tenfold the magical potency of the one at Dreadfort. Domeric simply stood there, frozen by the overwhelming presence. His tattoos, sensitive to magic, practically hummed as they absorbed the ambient power. With a heart tree like this back home, his reserve regeneration would skyrocket. Yes, this was what he'd been searching for. After securing the area with a few quick protective charms, he sat down in the snow and simply breathed. For a moment, there was peace. He felt his magical core slowly refilling. He wondered, was this why the air north of the wall held so much latent magic? Were all the heart trees here this powerful? But questions could wait. First, he had to find the beings responsible for binding these trees to the ley lines of the world. He needed to find the children of the forest. Just as he was about to stand, a familiar sensation pulsed beneath his skin. His altar tattoo was burning. Another gift was ready. He could choose an item or upgrade the tattoo's capabilities. But not now. He had other priorities. Rising to his feet, he drew his wand once more. "Point me, children of the forest." This time, the wand didn't point to the horizon. It pointed down, toward the roots of the heart tree. He blinked in surprise, stepping closer. A subtle arch in the snow caught his eye, an opening beneath the tree's twisted roots. A dark hollow, half concealed by nature. A cave. A grin slowly formed on his lips. "There you are," he whispered.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
Barbary Dustin was not the kind of person who would sit before a heart tree and pray to the old gods. Not after all that she had suffered in her life. But her nephew, her dear departed sister's son, had gone north of the wall despite all her protests. And now she had not heard from him for whole 2 moons. Before leaving, he had told her that the wall was probably a gigantic ice construct standing only because of the magic deeply embedded in it, and they would probably not be able to reach each other with the magical mirror because of its interference. As always, he was correct. The magical mirror didn't work. So, she had not heard about him for a long time, and as a result, she was worried. And with nothing else to do, she had come here in the Godswood in order to pray to the old gods. It was unlikely that they would hear her prayer. They never heard hers when she prayed for them to allow her to marry Brandon Stark. And they didn't listen to her when she prayed for the return of her husband's safety or the safety of her sister. But she was desperate, and sitting in front of Heart Tree would at least allow her to get some peace of mind. So, she sat in front of the Heart Tree and was about to pray when she heard a loud crack and turned around to find herself staring at the surreal scene of Dom Merrick standing in front of her with a bright smile on her face. Except that he was not alone and was holding hands with 2 other children of the same height as him. Those children were not the children of humans, but the children of the forest. The legends that she had heard so much about as a child. She stared dumbly at their group as the children started fidgeting under her stare until Domeric finally coughed in his hand. Her eyes widened for a moment before she lunged at him and enveloped him in a hug before crying out her grievances at him. It took him a good amount of time to console his aunt, who was rather worried that he might have gotten himself killed by the wildlings at the north of the wall. In his own experience, the wildlings were not as scary as the men made them out to be. But then again, he was living in the Middle Ages where every news you get was based on rumors. And rumors had the tendency to grow and exaggerate as they passed from one man to another. After that, he told her that he had to go back so that he could bring back his people safely. She threw another temper tantrum, which took even longer to calm down. By the end of it, she was rather angry with him once again. In the end, he told her to take care of Leaf and Ash and hide their existence from the other humans as they could go and carve faces on the dozens of weirwood trees he had planted in Godswood. She accepted his request, as always. She did, and with a final nod, he opera to the top of the wall. From there, he used his portkey to reach his group. Somewhere at the true north. POV of Domeric Bolton. With a sound of pop, Domeric appeared somewhere near the camp of his men. After waiting a while, he heard a soft, galloping sound, and then Grim appeared in the distance, running toward him. When Grim arrived at his side, he smiled at him and caressed his fur while Grim licked his face. Hey, old friend. Grim might be a magical construction, but he did not neglect his and improved his construction constantly in the past. Right now, Grim was an alchemy creation with basic intelligence rather than a simple, mindless magical construction. He had a thought to create more alchemy creature direwolves, but he didn't have the right opportunity to do it. After all, it would be too weird to find so many adult direwolves at the south of the wall. And when they were at the expedition north of the wall, he was always with his men. So, he didn't have the opportunity. Till now. Raxa also wanted a direwolf before. Raxa, Varko, and Miami. I guess I can manage to make 3 alchemy creatures with my current reserves. He took a few steps and arrived at a wider space in the woods. Then he took 3 white roundwood pieces carved with black runes from his bottomless pouch. These are the wooden cores he made from Weirwood 3, and the runes on them were written with ink he made from crushed dragon bones. He had already prepared all the necessary things in the past. All he needed to do was channel his magic to cores. This channeling process might have taken some time in the past, but with Merlin Sapphire, he had now 11 times of magic reserve compared to the past. He put the cores on the ground with some space between them, materialized his holly wand from its tattoo, from then channeled his magic to the cores. The runes glowed with a dark halo and activated and started to devour his magic. He supplied the cores with his magic at maximum output for a whole 4 minutes. And when the alchemy creatures were completed, he nearly depleted all the magic in the Merlin Sapphire. At last, his own reserves were still intact. He transformed his wand back into a tattoo and looked at his latest masterpieces. 3 direwolves were looking at him and waiting for his orders. They were as glamour as the Grim. Come here, He called them 3 dire wolves, 1 white, 1 red, and 1 golden color, came near to him and licked his hands and face. Okay, that's enough licking for today. He deliberately created them with these colors. His new banner had 3 colors, black, red, and white. A white weirwood tree with red leaves on a black background. That is why he wanted to march on battlefields with his 3 dire wolves, which had his banner colors. And for the golden color one, he created her especially for his Annie. He knew his Annie would like its royal appearance. Now, which name shall I give you? He looked at the white dire wolf. She would be given a Raxa, so he should name her with a simple name. Otherwise, Raxa might not say her name correctly. He put his hand on the white dire wolf's head and said, "Your name will be Ghost, so that you may collect lives without anyone noticing on the battlefield." Then he turned to the red dire wolf, which was going to be Varco's comrade. "Your name will be Carnage, so that you may slaughter the troops on the battlefield." After that, he looked at the last dire wolf. With her golden fur, she looked both royal and intimating. "I will not name you. I want my aunt to name you when we return to the Dreadfort. You should always protect her from any harm. This will be your lifetime mission." The golden dire wolf bowed her head and accepted her mission. "Okay, time to go back to the camp," he said, and climbed on the back of Grim. He thought of making a saddle for Grim in the past, but then he gave up the idea. With sticking and cushioning charms, he didn't need a saddle. Also, with a saddle, Grim would look more tame, and he didn't want that. Without a saddle, he looked more wilder and intimating. But others couldn't use magic, so he had to make saddles for his new 3 dire wolves when he returned to Dreadfort. "Let's go," he said, and went toward his camp. When they arrived at camp, his men were alarmed at first when they saw 4 dire wolf in the distance. But then they realized who he was and welcomed him into the camp, and some of them ran to inform Walton, Varco, and Raxa. Walton was the first one to arrive at his side and said with a bow, "Welcome back, my lord. I hope you are in good health. Do you have any injuries? Did you find what you sought?" I am back, and my health is perfect. You don't have to worry. And I did find what I sought. So this expedition was a success." Domeric replied with a smirk on his face. "Then let me congratulate you, my lord," Walton said with the same smirk on his face. "After all, how many people have gone to the true north in the last centuries, and how many of them have found what they sought? This expedition was not an accomplishment just for his lord. It was also an accomplishment for Walton and his men." While they were speaking, Varco and Raxa also joined them. "Da, you came back." Raxa ran to him and hugged him, gently this time. "Welcome back, my lord." Varco welcomed him with his usual seriousness. I am back." After Raxa and Varco welcomed him, they looked at 3 new dire wolves behind Domeric. Walton also was looking at them now. Domeric didn't keep them waiting and explained, "These 3 are our new companions. Raxa, didn't you say that you wanted a dire wolf? This one will be your companion in the future. Her name is Ghost. Take care of her well in the future, okay?" "Really, Dom?" I'll take care of Ghost. Don't worry," she said, and ran to hug her new companion. "The red one's name is Carnage. Take care of him well, Varco." He turned to Varco and said, "Carnage? I liked his name. Thank you, my lord, for your generosity," he said, and went to his direwolf side. Then Domeric turned to Walton and saw his expression of expectation. He smiled wryly. "Don't look at me like that. The golden one is for my aunt." "Haha, I wasn't expecting anything. The men rest enough. I will go ready them for marching, my lord," Walton said while turning around. It was a little bit shameful situation for him, but he really wanted a dire wolf for himself and couldn't control his expression for a moment. "Don't be sad, Walton. Who knows, maybe I can find another dire wolf on the way back to the wall. By the way, what color dire wolf would you like to have?" Walton turned back to Domeric again, and with a smile on his face, he said, "Then I will thank you for your generosity, my lord. As for color, it would be perfect if it has gray fur like at the Stark banner, or a brown fur one like a bear. I'll see what I can do. Now prepare the men. I want to return my lands as soon as possible," he said. "Yes, my lord," Walton replied and left. Domeric turned to Varco. "Oi, Varco, we'll march when we can, and when we can't, we'll train. I need to improve my swordsmanship. Also, I want to include Raxa in our training. What do you think? Are you sure? She might be too strong for you." Varko said to him. Domeric was already training with Varko for a while, but he didn't train with Raxa yet. More precisely, he tried to spar with her once, but she nearly killed him with a powerful strike, so he didn't dare to spar with her again. She improved her control, so it shouldn't be a problem now. I hope, he said, but his voice was unconvincing. Anyway, I'll scout the way, so prepare to march. Don't forget to tell Raxa as well. We'll train next time when we stop to rest. Yes, my lord. I will. Don't worry. Domeric nodded to him and called Hedwig's name. Hedwig. With a sound of pop, Hedwig appeared in the sky, floated down, and landed on Domeric's shoulder. "How are you, Hedwig?" he said while giving her some pieces of bacon that he took out from his bottomless pouch. When he went to search for children of forest, he didn't take Hedwig with him and left her with Walton and others. That way Hedwig could alarm him if something happened to his men. "Let's scout the way, my friend," he said and warged into her mind. With his control, Hedwig flew into the sky. With Hedwig's eyes, he could scout miles ahead from the sky. And with that, Lord Bolton's expedition truly came to an end. They marched back to the wall during the day and set up a camp when the sun came down. Days passed quickly. In that time, Domeric marched with men during the day and trained with Varko and Raxa in the evening. He even found another dire wolf and gave it to Walton. This one has brown fur like Walton wanted. It was a rewarding return trip for him. He also sacrificed accumulated magic to upgrade the Sibyl of the Deathly Hallows. His tattoo was now level 2, and he was waiting for his tattoo to accumulate enough magic for another sacrifice. It needed to accumulate more magic for a level 2 sacrifice, but rewards also would be greater. As a level 2 sacrifice, he could get 2 white items or 1 level 2 items, which is also a green item. After an uneventful journey to the south, they finally saw their first destination on their way to the home, the wall. Castle Black, POV of Gior Mormont. The brothers from the Night's Watch were having their lunch in the Great Hall of the Castle Black when the door of the Great Hall was flung open and one of the new recruits ran in while breathing heavily with a fearful look on his face. Lord Commander, what is it, boy?" The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch asked gruffly as he stood up from his chair, and everyone went silent at once. "Lord Commander," the recruit said once again before he took a long breath, and continued. Lord Bolton and his men had returned from their expedition. Gior Mormont raised an eyebrow as the rest of his brothers cheered. After all, Lord Domeric Bolton had a very good reputation in the Watch because of his recent gifts. But while the brothers were cheering for Lord Bolton's safe return, Gior Mormont wondered if the young lord succeeded in his mission at the north of the wall or not. As he looked at the young recruit who had given them the message, he could tell that the boy wanted to say something more, but couldn't because of the noise. So he picked up his cup and banged it on the table 3 times, which quieted down the hall at once. "What else?" he asked the boy, and the new recruit gulped before he said, "Lord Commander, he brought giants with him." After a fierce discussion between the brothers of the Night's Watch on whether they should allow the giants to come through the tunnel, it was finally decided by everyone that the giants were technically not wildlings, as they had never really fought any giant or even seen one for that matter. So, in the end, Gior Mormont allowed them to open the gate and went ahead to meet with Lord Bolton. He was frankly surprised by how few causalities the Bolton men had suffered in the expedition, as he knew that they had never traveled to the north of the wall before. Perhaps their training was just as hard as that Walton guy had claimed instead of hot air. In the end, Gior Mormont met Lord Bolton in front of his army of 1,000 men, 83 giants, and 27 mammoths. "I see that you've succeeded in your venture, my lord," Gior Mormont said as he looked at the giants in the distance, wondering how many men it would take to kill one of them. More than the Night's Watch could afford. His mind told him, "I have, my lord, on all 3 of my ventures," Domeric Bolton said with a satisfied smirk, and Gior gave a nod in return. Before Domeric had left the wall, he had told the Lord Commander of the 3 reasons why he was going on the expedition: for the giants, for the wargs, and for the children of the forest. and Jeor Mormont could clearly see the giants as well as the wildling men and women at the back of the group with their animals who could be none other than wargs. But he couldn't see the fabled children of the forest in front of him. As if reading his mind, Dalmeric Bolton smirked at him and said, "You're searching for the children of the forest, don't you? Don't worry. They're already at the south of the wall." Jeor raised an eyebrow at those words and asked, "Did they climb across the wall?" Dalmeric simply shook his head. "No, my lord. But the wall is made up of ice and magic. Magic that was imbued into it by the children of the forest. So it's not hard for them to come and go across the wall. They just don't do it because they didn't want to leave their caves before. And they're now willing to leave those caves because of you?" Jeor Mormont asked, and Dalmeric shook his head. "No, not for me, but for their duty, for a promise." Jeor Mormont knew that he wouldn't get any more answers, so he simply nodded his head and said, "The hospitality of the Night's Watch is yours, Lord Bolton." After 3 weeks of travel, Dalmeric and his men finally reached Dreadfort. The first thing he noticed upon coming back home was the increased amount of ambient magic in the atmosphere. He had no doubt it was the work of Leaf and Ash whom he'd left in charge of the Godswood. Once they returned to the castle, his people gawked when they saw him, Varco, Raxa, and Walton riding huge direwolves while another direwolf walking with them. He made saddles for their direwolves after they arrived at Last Hearth and purchased some saddle materials to prevent suspicion, so they could ride them easily now like any other mount. The castle folk already knew Grim, but seeing 5 huge direwolves side by side was something so majestic that they couldn't forget for a while. Well, he couldn't blame them. After all, his direwolves were alchemy creations and bigger than the adult direwolves at the True North. Not to mention they were faster, stronger, more durable, and agile than normal direwolf. Basically, they were war machines that wore the skin of direwolves. But they didn't need to know that. To the others, they were just big, majestic direwolves, and that was a good thing. After his aunt hugged him for a while, he met her with the golden-colored direwolf and told her that from now on the direwolf would be her companion and her protector. She turned her head to him with lightning speed, and there was an expression on her face saying, "Are you serious?" "No, I am Dalmeric, not serious." He wanted to say to her, but he doubted anyone in this world understood that joke. Maybe after he resurrected Sirius, that joke would appear in this world too. That would be hilarious to see. So, he just nodded to his aunt and said, "I didn't name her yet. Thought that you want to name her yourself." "Thank you. I will name her Bethany, the same as my sister's, your mother's name. She will remind me of my sister and you every time I look at it," she said with a radiant smile on her face. Maybe even more radiant than the shiny fur of Bethany at the moment. So a memorial name then. Truthfully, it was way better than what he expected from his aunt. He thought she would name her something like Shiny or Gold. On the other hand, that stupid Walton named his direwolf with the name of Muddy. What a waste. He should name him just like the others. Anyway, what's done is done. His aunt held a large feast for him to return home from his expedition safely. Once the short feast ended, he went to the giants and talked with them about a suitable habitat for them. And after a few hours, he gave them a good amount of land in the lonely hills along with a steady supply of food until they were able to set themselves up in their new home. Suffice it to say that he had to create armor for them soon enough. After all, despite being 14 feet tall, they were still vulnerable to arrows and spears. And he didn't want them to die so cheaply when he eventually took them to war. Wearing a frost steel armor that was imbued with featherweight charm would definitely keep them safe from such things, as well as allow them to move around without any difficulty. He would also commission some large swords, war hammers, and shield for them. Just thinking about what kind of damage they could do on a battlefield gave him goosebumps. Yup, he definitely had to create some magical armor and war hammers for them. The other thing that came to his notice was the fact that the blacksmiths had gotten used to the blast furnace as well as the water wheel-powered hammer. And because of the constant supply of good quality steel, they were now able to mass-produce swords, shields, armor, and spears for the Roman-style legion that he was about to train in the near future. He had now enough armor and weapons to equip an army of 6,000 men easily. That was a bit of a bummer because he didn't even have that many soldiers in his army at the moment. So it was decided that most of his blacksmiths would now start creating equipment that would benefit the farmers and other small folk, as well as steel materials required for ongoing and planned constructions on his lands. And any weapon and armor made by them would be sold to the other houses of Westeros and Essos. He could also use them as a gift to other lords to improve his relationship with them and gain some favors from them. After all, these were scarcer and more valuable in the north than in southern lands. The greatest thing about this was that the armor they created was not only sturdier than the ones created by other blacksmiths, but they also took far less time to be made thanks to the waterwheel hammers. This wouldn't stop him from selling those things at an expensive price, but he had no doubt that he could easily create another industry focused solely on smithing in his domain. But for now, he needed to start creating the army that he would need to protect his prospering domain. After all, the wealth you can't protect doesn't truly belong to you, does it? He knew this fact very well, and that was the reason why he was trying to be as inconspicuous as possible in this world at the moment. Otherwise, why wouldn't he use his magic and hide his identity as a wizard from most of the people? Because he wasn't strong enough. If he used his magical powers, he could win against a small army, but could he win against a 100,000 men army? Not so likely. And even if he won in some way, he would lose his loyal men. His land was razed down during the battle, and he had to start over. No, that wasn't a smart thing to do. If the king and lords of houses saw him as a threat, they would do everything to kill him and loot his land. No, he had to wait and bide his time. In time, he would show his land's strength to other lords piece by piece while improving his relationships with them. So, they wouldn't see him as a threat, but as a strong ally. He didn't wish to conquer more lands at the moment anyway. More lands meant more resources, but also meant more land that he had to develop and make prosperous. And he didn't need that kind of workload at the moment. For now, he needed to develop his land to make it his capital city and his logistic headquarters in the future. With a modern city in his hand, in the future, when the time is right, anything would be possible, right? Robb Stark was sitting in his father's solar and learning how to rule the north from him when they heard a knock on the door. "My lord." Maester Luwin's voice came from outside the door. "Come in," his father called out, and the old maester entered the room and gave him a small nod before he walked up to his father and handed him a missive. "Letter from Wall?" his father asked, and Maester Luwin nodded. "Yes, my lord. A rider named Yoren just arrived from the Wall with this letter," Maester Luwin said. "Rider?" his father asked. "Why would they send a rider and not just a raven?" "I'm afraid we'll only find out the reason once we read their letter," Maester Luwin said, and his father gave a nod before he opened the letter and started reading it. And the more his father read, the more incredulous his expression became until he became curious about the letter too. Why would a letter from the Night's Watch elicit such a response from his father? He remembered hearing the rumor that his friend Domeric led 1,000 men across the Wall on an expedition. No one knew why Domeric would do such a thing, and most people had guessed that the Boy Lord would die at the north of the Wall, but Robb doubted that such a thing would happen. He had seen Domeric when he arrived in Winterfell while riding on top of his large black direwolf, and had spent a good amount of time with him when he stayed in Winterfell before he went to participate in the Greyjoy War. And he knew that the boy didn't seem the type of person who would make foolish decisions and die such a wasteful death. No, there must be a good reason behind Domeric's expedition to the north of the Wall. And if his guess was correct, then this letter probably contained some news about his friend. Otherwise, why else would the Night's Watch send a rider to deliver it instead of a simple raven? After his father finished reading it, he looked at the letter incredulously for a moment before he controlled his expression once again and looked at Maester Luwin. "Perhaps I need to meet this Night's Watch brother after all," his father said, and Maester Luwin gave a nod before going out to call Yoren. "What does the letter say, father?" he asked curiously once the maester had left the room, and his father looked at him with apprehension, and he thought that his father wouldn't tell him for a moment. Then his father let out a sigh and said, Lord Domeric Bolton had come back from his expedition from the north of the Wall. His father said, and stayed silent after that, as if wondering how to say the next few words. He grew impatient and asked, and it seems that Lord Domeric Bolton had brought back some giants and wargs with him. It took a few moments for him to properly register what his father had said, and then his jaw dropped. Giants? Wargs? Weren't those things from myths? How did his friend Domeric find them in the north of the wall, and how he brought them back from the true north, if this missive told the truth? While Rob was thinking about his friend and supposed achievements, Maester Lewin came back to his father's solar with a man named Yoren, a brother from Night's Watch. Brother Yoren, the letter you brought has some hard-to-believe news. Is it true that Lord Bolton returned from his expedition to the wall with giants and wargs? His father asked. Yes, my lord. It is absolutely true. I saw them with my own eyes like all Night's Watch brothers in the Castle Black. There were dozens of giants with huge mounts. I think Lord Bolton called them mammoths. And some wildlings could control animals. Some of them even control bears and direwolves. Brother Yoren reported his father. I see. I assume Lord Bolton arrived at the wall about 2 weeks ago. How is the Lord Bolton's men's situation? Did he lose most of his men? Did he stay at the wall to recover or leave for the Dreadfort? His father asked again. Looks like his father is more interested in news about his friend Domeric than he thought. Lord Bolton, men mostly unharmed, my lord. From what I heard, they only lost a few scouts in the expedition, nothing more. Walton, Lord Bolton's war commander, even boasted at the feast that this expedition was a huge achievement that would go down in the history books. Brother Yoren dropped the shocking news. His friend Domeric went to the north of the wall and brought giants and wargs back with him, while losing only a few men. This achievement was really something that could go down in the history book. He could already hear the songs that bards would sing about Domeric and his achievements. He really envied this friend of his. While he was sitting in his father's solar and learning, his friend was exploring the lands no other lord thought or dared to go. What? How could he lose only a few men after meeting with giants and wargs? Are you about this? And what is this feast you were talking about? His father asked after receiving the shocking news. No one really knows how Lord Bolton achieved that, my lord. But we all saw that both giants and wargs were looking at Lord Bolton with awe and respect. And about the feast, my lord. After Lord Bolton returned from his expedition to the wall, he talked with Lord Commander and held a feast for his achievement that lasted a week. I heard that all the costs were reimbursed by Lord Bolton himself. Oh, and Lord Bolton and his men returned to Wall about 3 weeks ago. Not 2, my lord. What do you mean Lord Bolton and his men returned to Wall 3 weeks ago? Then why did I receive the letter just now? It should be 2 weeks' long journey for a lone messenger from Wall to Winterfell. Did something happen on your journey? Tell me. Eddard Stark asked Yoren with a frowned expression. Did this brother of Night's Watch slack on his journey? Or Lord Commander of the Wall didn't see this news as important enough to send a man to him as soon as possible? 3 weeks meant that if Lord Bolton left Wall quickly with his men, then he should have already arrived at the Dreadfort or about to arrive. Not like he was going to do something about that. But not doing it and not being able to do it are two different things. So eagerly awaited the answer from this brother of Night's Watch. My lord, it was because of the feast. Feast? Yes, my lord. Lord Bolton said that he could always celebrate his achievement with his men at the Dreadfort and wanted to celebrate with every man in Castle Black because he could only do it now. He sent his men after a night of stay. Only his 2 sworn shields stayed with him at the wall. He feasted with us for a whole week. After a week, he left with his sworn shields to catch his men. Lord Commander gave me the letter after Lord Bolton departed. This, for a moment Lord Stark couldn't find words to say something. Was it deliberate? Did Lord Bolton hold a feast to delay news about his expedition until he reached his castle? Or he just wanted to celebrate after a long expedition? Am I thinking too much? Why is always Lord Bolton the one who gives me a headache? Bolton lands. POV of Domeric Bolton. The land from this stream to that mountain in the distance is yours. Domeric said in old tongue to Mag the Mighty as his men brought wagon after wagon that was full of food while looking at the giants in disbelief and shock. Land. Ours. The giant said as he pointed at the stream and then the mountain. Yes, all this land is yours. You can do whatever you want within these lands. He slowly explained in old tongue so that the giant would understand what he said. Though you won't have to worry about food, as I'll continue to send that to you every 3 months." He explained, and the giant gave another nod to him. "Do not harm the men that I'll send to bring you food." "Okay," he said, and the giant gave him another nod, and a simple use of legitimacy told him that Mag at least understood what he said on a basic level. He gave a nod, and the giant climbed on his mammoth before leaving for the place given to them to build a new shelter upon. I had not believed that they were true. His aunt's voice came from behind him once the giants and the mammoths had left. "In hindsight, I should have believed you when you told me about them." He turned to look at her and found that she was still gazing at the giants with a disbelieving gaze. "It's all right," he said. "These are the kind of things that a person finds hard to believe until they see it for themselves. I do not doubt that any northern lord or lady who hears about giants would find it similarly hard to believe. And I'm even going to point out what the southerners think when they hear about this news." His aunt stayed silent for a while, and they both watched the giants vanish behind the hill before she finally broke it. "Giants, children of the forest, magic. It seems like I'm living in the age of the heroes once again," she said with a chuckle before she turned to look at him. "You are serious about protecting them, aren't you?" she asked, and he nodded. "Yes, I'll protect them, and in return, they'll protect me and my lands when we are attacked by other people." "You seem pretty sure that you'll be attacked by other people," she said with a raised eyebrow, and he gave a careless shrug. "A prosperous land attracts attention, and not always the good kind. That is a simple truth of this world, and sooner or later, I'll attract the bad kind of trouble as well. It's just a matter of time before we're attacked by other people." She gave him a nod, and he turned to look at another woman who worked as a seamstress within Dreadfort. "Did you take all of their measurements, Elena?" he asked, and the woman gave him a shaky nod in return. "Good. Walton, take the measurements from her and give them to Tobo Mott. I want him and the other blacksmiths to create armor for all the giants with those measurements." "It'll be done, my lord," the man said with a feral grin and put the paper in his pocket, and Domeric took a deep breath before looking at the lands in front of him once again. "You do know that other people might try to attack these giants, right?" his aunt asked, and he nodded before picking up the weirwood saplings that he had brought with him in order to plant them around these lands. "I know. That is why I'll plant these weirwood saplings and create a magical parameter around these lands. Parameter that would repel any human with the intent to harm these giants." "You could do such a thing?" his aunt asked, and he nodded. "Easily. It'll take some time to grow so many weirwood trees, and the children would have to spend some time turning those weirwood trees into heart trees by carving the faces, but after that, I won't have to worry about other humans harming the giants." "Is there anything that you cannot do?" his aunt asked with barely hidden amusement, and he snorted. "Many things. But let's return to the Dreadfort for now. After all, we have many things that we need to take care of." With that, he gave Walton a nod, and then took his aunt's hands in his. And then with a tug and a twist, they were back in Dreadfort the next moment once again. "Maester Wolken," he said in greeting as the maester came out of the room after finishing his daily teaching classes. "Lord Bolton," the maester said and gave a cordial bow. "What can I do for you?" "I'm here to ask you about the status of the clay that I gave you," he said as he glanced at the dozens of teenage boys and girls who had lost their parents in the Greyjoy Rebellion. They were now learning how to read and write under his maesters and would work as officials in his city in the future. After all, the more literate people there are working under him, the easier it'll be for him to run his land. "Very well then, Lord Bolton. Please come with me," the maester said, and they followed him to another building in a distance where he could see some men working on mud and clay. "This way, my lord," the maester said, and he followed the chubby man inside the large room where hundreds of different kinds of bricks were kept on the side. "We followed your orders and created 25 different bricks from all the clay that you gave us," the maester said, and took out a paper kept under one of the bricks. "We've not yet finished all the work, but 19 of the 25 bricks have already been prepared for your inspection," the maester said, and gave him the paper which showed which clay belonged to which location. Today he wanted to see the result of one of his recent projects. His city and his port town were under planning, and some construction had already begun. He didn't want his city and port just another medieval settlement, but something more. But for that, he needed more modern and durable materials. So he started another project with the reward he got from the symbol of Deathly Hallows before he went on the expedition north of the wall. Actually, he got 3 rewards total before the expedition. A book called Building and Construction, a book called Earth Cuisine, and a book called Art of Time. All of them were white rewards, of course. His tattoo was still level 1 at that time, and still didn't get another reward. After his tattoo became level 2, its magic capacity also increased dramatically. Even with new heart trees in his land thanks to the children of the forest, the symbol still needed more time to fully recharge. But that meant that level 2 rewards would significantly be better. And if by some chance he didn't like the level 2 reward, he could get 2 level 1 instead. White level rewards that he got till today were only mundane knowledge, but that was what he needed most at the moment to develop his land. So, he waited patiently. Anyway, he already started 2 projects with the knowledge that he gained from rewards, and now he came here to inspect one of them. He turned to Varco, who was standing silently in his magically enhanced armor, and said, "Varco, try breaking 3 bricks from a group and give them a rating from 1 to 10. The man gave a nod and then went about breaking all the bricks one by one. A few of them broke easily. Most of them required some effort on his part to do so, and some were rather hard to break with the sword. By the end of his inspection, he didn't need Varco's response, as he already knew which bricks were the strongest out of them all. He looked down at the paper and found that the 3 bricks belonged to the group that was brought from the bank near Last River, a deep cavern in the lonely hills and near the Broken Branch. The closest location was the Last River, but his relations with Karstarks were bad, and he didn't want to go to them for anything, so that was a no-go. After some deliberation, he finally decided that he would use clay from the banks of the Broken Branch River, which fell under the domain of the Hornwoods. Use the clay that I brought from the Broken Branch River and discard the rest. He told his maester, "The brick is quite sturdy as it is, but it's not sturdy enough. Try adjusting the temperature. It is probably not as I instructed you before. You have a moon's worth of time to show me the results," he said, and the maester gave a quick nod before he gave the paper back to the maester. "And how are the cook's training going? I hope they are learning diligently," he asked maester. This was his second project about the reward he got before. The book called Earth Cuisine had all kinds of food from its old world. At first, he used the knowledge that he gained from the book to teach his castle cooks, and he was just happy that he could eat food from his old world again. But after he saw the castle folks' reaction to the foods made by Earth Cuisine, he changed his mind. Now, he wanted to make food from Earth to his land's charm point. So he chose some trustworthy and loyal men and instructed his castle cooks to educate and teach them. When they learned all they needed, he would open restaurants, diners, and street stalls in his city and towns to realize his gourmet land project. They are learning diligently, and they are rather eager about it, my lord. They will not fail you." Maester replied to him, "Good. I also want to start a new project, Maester Wolken." "A new project, my lord? A new project, my lord?" Maester Wolken asked. "Yes, I want to build a new workshop. This workshop will make a new luxury product, a new creation of mine. They will mostly assemble product pieces that will come from blacksmiths, wood crafters, glass workshops, and maybe some leather craftsmen. But it is a work that requires finesse, so choose people according to their hand dexterity," he said. "I will arrange everything according to your wishes, my lord." "But what is this luxury product?" Maester asked with an intrigued voice. "Clocks and watches," Domeric said with a smirking smile on his face. Yes, Domeric thought it would be useful for his people and land to have clocks. With clocks, there would be time management, synchronization, predictability, advanced cost management, and many, many more developments in his lands that increase efficiency. And how did he know how to create clocks and watches? Of course, because of knowledge inside the book called Art of Time. When he saw the book for the first time, his heart skipped a beat. He thought he got a book about time magic, but alas, it was a book about all kinds of time-measuring methods and devices from his old world. He was disappointed at that time. After all, he knew the Tempest spell. All he had to cast the spell, and he would know the time. So, he discarded the book at that time because of the workload of his other projects. But after a while, he realized that measuring time would bring so much to his land. And also, he wanted to use these clocks and watches as gifts to strengthen relations with other houses in the north, and even with southern houses when the time came. And when the clocks and watches are damaged or broken, hey, clocks, watches, I don't think I heard them before, my lord. Maester Wolken said, after thinking a while. Because they are my new creations. Basically, they are devices that show the time. Like candles and hourglasses, but more advanced. You will see when the time comes. Just arrange the workshop and workers now. And give these plans to maesters who are responsible for building the city and port town. I want to build it in both settlements. He said and gave some parchments that included drawings and plans of a building. Maester took the parchments and examined them for a while before frowning and said, My lord, this kind of high and thin will be hard to build. It might even collapse before we finish. Why do we need this kind of building in our city center and port town center? It looks like a watchtower, but much higher. Well, this building is a clock tower. They will be seen by everyone from the city and the port town. This way everyone in the city can know and measure the time. And I will also deploy some men at the top of the clock tower of the watch city. If there was a fire in the city, these men alarm the necessary people. As for the risk of collapse, just tell maesters to follow the plans exactly, and everything will be fine. Dom Eric said and didn't elaborate anymore. Yes, my lord, I will as you said. Maester said and left while thinking about this strange building and time-measuring devices that Lord Bolton said. Dreadfort Castle. POV of Dom Eric Bolton. You're going to the Hornwoods? Once again, his aunt asked, looking slightly concerned. I need clay and coal from them in order to make bricks. He said with a shrug. Coal? They don't have any coal mines. His aunt said with a frown as she tried to work her memory. That's because they don't. At least not yet. He said. What do you mean? She asked. I wanted to search for coal within my lands as coal is one of the best fuels available to us at the moment. But there were no coal deposits within my lands. He said with a shrug. When I finally found the coal deposits, I realized that it was not within my domain. And do those deposits fall under the Hornwoods? She asked, understanding the context, and he nodded. They have 3 different coal deposits within their lands. Do you understand what that means? He asked. What? She asked with a little annoyance. It means 3 different coal mines, 3 different sources of fuel. And 3 more reasons why I plan to create a supply line from the Hornwood lands to Dreadfort. He said, after all, we are already buying timber from them for paper and ships, and I need the coal from their lands. So why not buy clay from their lands as well? Wood, coal, dirt. It seems like the Hornwoods have everything, she said with a groan, and he shook his head. Not all. He replied, we have far more iron mines within our lands than the rest of the North and Riverlands combined. Not to mention the silver and copper mines. In fact, we have many things that the Hornwoods don't and probably will never have. And with the creation of the new factories within my lands, our wealth and power will only continue to grow. If you don't bankrupt yourself first, she said with a sigh, and he let out a chuckle. Don't worry. It may sometimes look like I'm wasting my wealth on unnecessary things like the expedition north of the wall, selling the Valyrian blade in exchange for skilled men, or using the maesters under me to educate people. But believe me, all of the things that I do will bring huge returns to our house in the future. His aunt gave him a nod, and he nodded back before he rode on Grim and left for Hornwood with 50 of his most trusted men, along with Raxa and Varco. This is preposterous. Hallie's Hornwood shouted and banged the table with his hand. I will not accept so few gold dragons for 3 coal mines and the dirt within my lands. The young Bolton lord, however, remained unperturbed at his anger, and the boy even had the audacity to yawn in front of him, as if this was a matter of no importance to him. And despite his anger for the Bolton boy lord, there were times within his life when he wished that his own son was more like Lord Domeric Bolton. After all, everyone knew how much the Bolton lands had prospered under their new lord. What kind of lord wouldn't want to see their own lands become more prosperous? That was why he was so happy when the Bolton boy lord had told him that there were 3 large coal deposits within his land. And that was why he was so angry when the boy told him that he'd take those coal deposits for a monthly price of 100 gold dragons. He was sure that he would be able to earn double or even triple that amount of money if he opened the new mines on his own. The only problem was that. But you don't have 3 coal mines, do you? The boy lord said while looking at him with his intense pale eyes. In fact, you don't even have a single mine within your lands. And you have no idea where the coal deposits are. Isn't that right? They both already knew the answer, so he simply glared at the boy, hoping to overwhelm him with his age and experience, but he had failed once before when the boy came to negotiate the price of the timber within his lands, and he very much doubted that he would succeed in intimidating the boy lord this time. So, after a long confrontation of will, he finally looked away, accepting his defeat and secretly hoping once more that he had a son as capable as Domeric Bolton. You're right. We don't have any coal mines, and I have no idea where the coal deposits are. He had not wanted to say that, but for some reason, Domeric Bolton's unyielding gaze seemed to force him to speak his mind instead of playing political games like he did with others. That is correct, the boy lord said. So wouldn't it be better to simply accept the gold I'm giving you? 300 for the mines and 200 for the clay. 500 each month and 6,000 within a year. Wouldn't it be better to simply accept that gold than have nothing at all? Any other time, he would have been stubborn and denied the boy's offer. Any other time, he would have denied the offer and then used all his manpower to find the coal deposits within his lands, even though it was unlikely that he would find anything anytime soon. But for some reason, he felt strangely calm and rational at this moment and decided that having 6,000 gold dragons every year was a far better option than having nothing. After that, they ironed out the details and signed a contract within an hour, and the boy lord and his host of 50 men had left his castle before nightfall, leaving him with a contract that'll last for 20 years. He looked at the box filled with 30,000 gold dragons, which were the payment for the first 5 years, and started thinking about the best way to use it. Dreadfort Castle. POV of Domeric Bolton. Welcome back, Domeric. How was the negotiation? Did you get what you want? His aunt welcomed him at the castle gate with people from his inner circle. He already told her that she didn't need to welcome him every time at the castle gate when he returned from a journey, but she insisted that this was the proper behavior for a noble house. Thank you, Auntie. About the negotiations, how about we talk on my solar while we're playing a game? I want to show you my new creations. Domeric said to his aunt with a smirking smile. On the way, while returning to Dreadfort from Hornwood, he created some board games and wanted to show his aunt. There was very little entertainment in this world. Noble ladies mostly knitted, sewed, read, or gossiped in their leisure time. And noblemen were even worse. Some of them sparred and read, but most of them drank wine while bragging or went straight to a brothel. So, he wanted to create some entertainment while making some gifts for other houses and increasing his reputation in this realm. But first, he wanted to get his aunt's opinion. Because of his modern worldview from his past life, there was a probability that he might not have made the best decision in some situations. New creations of yours? Sure. Let me see what old gods had whispered to you this time. She still thinks that I was chosen by the old gods. Well, whatever. Is not wrong, either. After all, I was chosen by death as death champion. After a while, at the solar of Domeric Bolton, Domeric was now playing a board game with his aunt after teaching her the rules. And the game was, of course, chess. Well, he customized the game according to this world's customs a little. He changed Rook's name to Castle, because nearly every lord had a castle, and with this name, they might embrace the game more quickly. Knight's name was still the same, but he changed Bishop's to Mage because he wanted to familiarize people with magical humans for his future identity as a wizard. Queen's name changed to King's Hand, or just Hand, because in Westeros, mostly King's Hand managed the realm in the name of the king. Lastly, King's name changed to Throne, but it could be still called King. Pawns were still pawns. About the negotiations with Lord Hornwood, everything went as I planned, and we agreed on a 20-year collaboration. Lord Hornwood, sure, is okay if everything went as you planned. Let me focus on the game, Dom. Then Domeric closed his open mouth and let his aunt focus on the game. Looks like his aunt was a competitive gamer. Tom stood outside the large castle and waited in line as the people from each village were given bags filled with seeds for sowing in their fields. Seeds that gave birth to a harvest that had 8 to 10 times more grain in it than a harvest from normal seeds. It had been a while since Lord Bolton of Dreadfort started giving away these seeds to every village within his lands. The seeds that the reason behind the prosperity of their village. He remembered a time in his life when he and his 6 siblings would go hungry at night because of the lack of food within their home, but such a thing had not happened ever since Lord Bolton started giving them these high-yielding seeds, whatever that meant. In fact, they had produced so much grain with the help of these seeds within the past harvest that his father, the village elder, told them to construct a granary so that they could store away the excess food that they could either sell to their own lord or keep for themselves. Similar things were happening within their surrounding villages, as he had not seen a single hungry child within those villages either. Something that was a miracle in itself. After a long wait, he finally reached the front where a sturdy-looking man was sitting on a desk with a pen and paper on the table. The man wrote something on the paper for a while before he looked up at him and asked, Tom, village name, Blue Valley Village, he said, reciting the name that the young Lord Bolton had given to their village. Number of families in the village? The man asked, and Tom took out a piece of paper and gave it to the older and stern-looking man. He had repeated this process a few times already, but he always felt nervous when standing in front of men like these. A pity that he didn't know how to read and write or count his numbers for that matter, or he would be able to recite the number from the top of his head like some other learned men. Granny Abba was the only learned one in his village, so she wrote down these things before he came here in order to take the seeds. 84. The man murmured as he looked at the paper. Last time there were only 81 families in your village. How did that change? The man asked sternly, and Tom felt like a little rabbit under the gaze of a fierce lion before he remembered the answer and said, Some folks from the nearby lands came to live within our lands because their own lands didn't produce so much food. The man continued looking at him for a long moment, as if searching for any lies within his words before he finally gave a nod, and Tom let go of a breath that he didn't know that he was holding. Very well, then, the man said before he started to calculate some numbers within a piece of slate with a white stone. After a while, the man finished his numbers and shouted at the guard standing behind him. Luton, bring out 8 plows, 8 seed drills, 16 oxen, and 28 shovels. He shouted, and the men behind him started to move in unison, and within the breath of a few minutes, all those things were brought up to him while he wondered what all this was about. Sure, they had followed the orders given by their lord and created a large barn for cattle, but he didn't know that they would be receiving so many oxen. His eyes almost came out of their socket as he looked at the plows, shovels, and the so-called seed drills that were being brought up to him. So far, the only thing that they used to tilt their lands was a wooden shovel. But those shovels and plows were clearly made of steel. Steel that only the high lords and the men under them used for their weapons. In fact, the only time he had seen Castel forge steel within his own village was when his father showed him the spear with a steel tip that he was gifted at the end of the last war by the late Lord Bolton for his bravery on the battlefield. To think that they would be receiving so many things made of steel was almost unthinkable to him. Then the stern man turned to him and said, Every 10 families in your village will receive 1 plow, 1 seed drill, and 2 oxen. And every 3 families will receive a steel shovel. Is that understood? Yes. Then repeat what I said. The man ordered sternly, and he repeated what he heard. He was good at that. The man nodded in satisfaction and said, Every family within your village will give 2 more bushels of grain for the next 3 years in order to pay for these things. Is that understood? Why, yes. He stammered out. There was a time when giving 2 more bushels of grain to the Lord for taxes would have left them with nothing to feed their family, but nowadays they could give 2 more bushels of grain and still have enough food to eat 3 times a day easily. Good. These men, the man said and pointed at the dozen or so guards standing behind him, would help you in carrying these things back to your village and make sure that no harm comes to you on the way. Is that understood? Then the man gestured, and a boy who was a few years younger than him came up to them while holding a stack of paper, ink, and quill. Tom, this boy's name is Roderick. He'll come to your village and take the names and numbers of all the families in your village. He is personally being sent to your village by the Lord, and you're to follow all his orders and do as he tells you to do, like the orders that came from Lord Bolton himself. Is that understood? Yes, he said, and the man gave a satisfactory nod before gesturing him to leave. He bowed in thanks before leaving the place with the dozen guards and the teenage boy who turned out to be someone who knew numbers and letters. Can I ask why you're being sent to our village? He asked the boy cautiously once they were on their way, and the boy gave a confident nod and said, "Yes, I'm going to write the names of every person within your village and give that report to Lord Bolton so that he can know how many people are living in his lands. I'm also going to teach you a new method of farming called four-field crop rotation that Lord Bolton himself invented." "Four-field crop rotation?" he asked, tasting the word in his mouth, and the boy gave a nod. "And last but not least, I'm going to read this letter in front of all the villagers." "Letter?" he asked as he saw a page filled with words in the boy's hands and kicked himself in his mind once again for not learning the letters from Grandma Alba when he had the chance. "What does it say?" he asked, and the boy gave him a feral grin as he said, "It says that Lord Bolton is offering work to everyone from the age of 15 to 40. "What kind of work?" he asked. "Oh, many kinds of work. Making bricks, making roads, mining. And Lord Bolton is even creating a standing army of his own to fight against the growing number of bandits within his lands." "Army?" he asked with childish fascination as he remembered the stories his father told him about war and glory. "Yes, and the pay is quite good as well," the boy said, and his eyes bulged open once again. "Pay? I don't think my father was paid the last time he went to war," he said with some confusion, and the boy nodded. "Yes. Levies don't usually get paid aside from any loot that they're able to pick up from the enemy lands and loot from enemy corpses. But the army that Lord Bolton is creating won't be a levy, but a standing army that will be taught how to fight and taught and trained with the sole purpose of fighting in a war." "Is that so?" he asked, wondering if he should ask his father to join this standing army that Lord Bolton was making. But then he thought of something and asked, "And how much will I get paid in this army?" "Here." The boy smiled mischievously at him and said, 5 gold dragons each year." He would join this army even if his father tried to stop him from doing so. After all, his father himself only earns 1 to 2 gold dragons per year, and that too is spent on buying things for their house with almost nothing left to their name by the end of the year. If he could join this army, then he would be able to rise above his station in an instant. "You plan on joining it?" the boy asked, and he nodded. "And you? Are you not going to join it?" The boy thought about it for a moment before he shook his head. "I want to, but I'm going to join the profession of a teacher once I grow up." "Teacher?" A person who teaches others how to read and write. Something like a maester." The boy explained. "Why would you want to become a teacher when the army has such good pay?" he asked while scratching his head, and the boy grinned at him for a moment and then said, "Because I'm paid 10 gold dragons for my services already. And once I learn everything that I need to learn and become a teacher, I will receive 20 gold dragons each year for my services. More, once I get more experience." Dreadfort Castle. POV of Domeric Bolton. After playing chess constantly for an hour, Domeric moved his hand, queen, put it other side of the board, and finished the game the 7th time. "And checkmate ante, again," he said with a mischievous smile on his face. "You cheeky brat. Wait till I get some experience, and then we will play again," his aunt said through gritted teeth. "So, what is your opinion about the game? It is entertaining, right? Do you think nobles and small folk like it?" His aunt didn't answer immediately, but clenched her chin with her thumb and forefinger and thought a little while looking at the chessboard. "It is not just entertaining, Dom. It is more than that. It is like controlling battlefields with your own hand according to your own strategy. Like a general. No, like a king on a battlefield. It is mind-opening and intriguing. I think a lot of people love it. Lords, maesters, generals, knights, master craftsmen, and many more. As long as they are an intellectual type, every man and woman will love this game. Some of them even might use it to educate their children and sharpen their minds. But leisure and less intellectual types probably find it boring. That's what I also thought. So, I created 2 more games. One of them is checkers. Can be played on the same board with different pieces. It is simpler. The last one is backgammon. Can be played on the other side of the board with the checkers pieces, but the number of pieces is different. In this game, you have to use dice. So, to win you have to be both sharp and lucky," he said while taking out some papers. "These papers include rules of all 3 games. You can give them to maesters and other intellectual people to learn. When the time comes, I will send these games to every house in the north as a gift." Well, except Karstark's. Anyway, I will need people who can teach maesters at houses in the north. So, you want to improve your relations. That's good. One of the reasons is that. Yes. But also, I want to improve my reputation and spread these games to other lands. I see. Improving your reputation is a good thing. It will cause other lords to see you as more than a young kid. And spreading games, do you want to open another business for these games? Kind of. These games are easy to make. So, they can't be luxury products. We will sell them at our bookstores that we are opening at Westeros and Essos at the moment. Their price will be cheap, but also accept requests for custom-made games that are made from wood, silver, gold, and even glass. But more importantly, we will hold tournaments for these games. Oh, you want to attract intellectual people to your lands, right? She asked like she understood his purpose. Exactly. But this is not today's talk. I want you to take care of the game gifts that I will send to other houses. I want to send 10 boards, including all 3 games as a set, and 1 custom-made board of chess according to the house we will send. Oh, and don't sell any games till I gift them the lords first. Don't worry, I take care of it. But chess. Oh, that's the short name of the game that we played first. It comes from trying to constantly make checks to your rival's throne. It is a weird name. What is the long name? She asked. It is Game of Thrones, he said. To anyone else, his stoic face might look like it has always been. After all, he had never been good at showing any emotions and hid behind his icy expression whenever something bad happened. But Caitlin had lived with him for a decade, so she knew. She knew that he was worried about something. But she also knew that he would never share his burdens with others. So she decided to confront him about it after dinner at bed, once their children had been sent off. And once she confronted him about it, and learned what had worried him so much, she was shocked. 4 times more food than normal times? And 15 times more iron than past years? She asked, not really believing what she had heard. After all, how is it possible that the peasants of a particular land are able to increase the quantity of their food production by such a large amount within the duration of a few years? Had the Bolton lands suddenly turned as fertile as the lands of the Reach and the Riverlands? Such a thought was rather foolish, but how else were the peasants within that area able to produce so much grain? As for the 15 times iron being produced by the Boltons, she had no idea what to even think about it. After some prodding, she found out that before Domeric Bolton became the Lord of Bolton lands, they only had 2 mines. They now have 16. And the increased number of miners from both the Iron Islands and the Westerlands made it, so that each iron mine is producing much more iron ore than it earlier did. Not only that, the Boltons now also had a silver and a few copper mines. She almost felt her mind shut down from all the information. Where did all these mines spring up from within the Bolton lands? Was it true that Domeric Bolton was blessed by the old gods? Once upon a time, she would have laughed at the absurdity of such a thought, but now she was not so sure anymore. And from the way her husband looked at the paper, she knew that he had similar thoughts about Domeric Bolton, even though he would never admit it to anyone else. Still, did they not know of the significance of a person owning a silver mine? It was, after all, the second most precious metal in Westeros, followed only by the gold. Did her husband not understand how much wealth a person could accumulate if they just owned a silver mine? From the worried look on his face, she felt that he had a good idea about what having a silver mine might mean, but so far Lord Bolton had not done anything wrong, so her husband didn't know how to deal with this situation. Still, the Boltons had been the enemy of the Starks for a long amount of time, and watching your enemy grow stronger day by day was very frustrating. After all, she might be born a Tully, but she was a Stark now and had children with the same name whose lives would be in danger if the young Lord Bolton continued to amass his wealth and power like that. Ned, what are you planning to do about the Boltons? She asked and couldn't help but shake her head at the irony of it, as there was only a single Bolton alive in the north at the moment. A single Bolton who has taken his house to the height of prosperity never reached before by any northern house. Nothing, her husband said with a self-deprecating smile. Nothing, she asked incredulously. Yes, he may be gaining power, but growing crops and opening new mines, as well as creating paper and books, is no crime, Cat. He said with a tired sigh. Yes, But we still need to do something that would curb his growing power, or the Boltons would become too powerful, and we won't be able to do anything in the future," she said imploringly, but her husband simply shook his head with a sigh. "I truly cannot do any harm to him without any reason. He has done nothing wrong except to make his lands more prosperous, something that every lord desires to do. It would not be honorable." She almost grimaced at that. Almost. Because even if she was proud of her husband being an honorable man, she knew that sometimes honor can create more problems in the long term than solve them. Sometimes, honor needs to be sacrificed in order to do what is right. Unfortunately, this was a lesson that her husband never managed to learn. But after thinking for a while, she was able to see a solution that would not go against her husband's sense of honor, but that would stop the young Lord Bolton from plotting against them. "Lord husband," she said, and, sensing the change in mood, he put down the paper and turned to look at her with a serious expression. "What is it, my lady?" he asked gently. "Lord Domeric Bolton is a bachelor," she said. "Lord Domeric Bolton has not even reached his teenage years. Of course, he's a bachelor," he said with a smile, though she could feel that he understood where she wanted to go with this, but didn't want to say the words himself. "Our little Sansa is only a few years younger than him," she said imploringly, and he grimaced as soon as he heard those words. "I'm not going to betroth one of my daughters at such a young age," he said with a sad expression and a faraway look on his face. "I don't want to put such heavy responsibility on her at such a young age. I don't want to do such a thing either," she said, thinking about her young and naive girl. "But we need to bring Lord Bolton in the fold somehow. And what better way to do so other than to form a marriage alliance with him?" He still didn't look at all that convinced, so she sat up and looked at him seriously. "I know you don't want to do this, Ned, but this is something that needs to be done, and quickly before Lord Domeric Bolton is betrothed to someone else." "I know," her lord husband said miserably. "I just hoped that I wouldn't have to betroth my children for the benefit of the family." "Yes, but doing so might stop a civil war in the northern land in the future," she said, hoping he would realize how serious this situation was. Because if the reports that they occasionally receive about Lord Bolton were true, then House Bolton must have already gained more power than House Stark, something which was a clear recipe for a disaster. And her husband understood this as well, because after thinking about it for a while, he took a deep breath and nodded at her. "I'll see what I can do," he said, and she knew that she had convinced him about the betrothal. The bricks arrived, and the cement and steel arrived as well. His people have already started to create some houses based on the designs Domeric gave them. Thanks to the book called Buildings and Construction, he had knowledge about all kinds of buildings, construction materials, and how to make them. Of course, he still had to find and collect raw materials. And if he wanted to make highly advanced buildings, he had to create the necessary technologies first. So he left those highly advanced and modern buildings to the future and chose less advanced ones. The houses would consist of simple apartments with internal plumbing and would be quite expensive to build. Only the richest in his land would be able to live in these brick houses. But he was confident that with time, the price of brick and cement would come down and more people would be able to afford these houses. But for now, he ordered his men to construct a large building with many rooms that would serve as the first school in this world. Aunt Barbary thought that opening a school was a waste of his wealth and resources. However, he was confident that increasing the literacy of his people would only benefit him in the future. And if all that fails, then he could simply turn the school into a pseudo-military academy where the future leaders of his army will be molded. As for the news on other places, he heard that the giants have found a nice cave in the lands he gave them and have settled down in that area without any problem. The training of the wargs he brought south with him was also coming along quite well. A distinct use of legilimency to increase the health of their mental state has made a lot of improvement to their mental prowess. The woman named Briar is able to control half a dozen birds already. And as for Vermeer's six skins, he was able to control hundreds of rats at once without losing his mind, and was able to scout any castle or fortress for weak points rather easily. He already knew that all the wargs that he had trained in so far would be highly useful to him if a war ever broke out in his lands. The news about the port being created at the mouth of the Weeping Water River, however, is not all that good. The port is still rather small and is not able to hold the growing number of ships in his fleet. That problem became even more apparent when he told the shipwrights to start the construction of large ships that could hunt whales in the shivering sea. After all, whales are a good source of meat and oil. He could also use a lot of its parts to make soap. He had already begun producing soap, but the amount didn't meet his expectations. To make them cheap and sell them to every small folk, he had to increase the amount of production and lower the cost. So, whales were the perfect solution to his dilemma. And there are plenty of whales in the sea. So why not hunt some of them to feed his people and bring new resources to sell in the market? As for the port, he was thinking about having his people dig a large hole in the ground and fill it with water. After that, he would effectively create an artificial port. He knew that such a project would require a large number of men and a large amount of time, but he was willing to sacrifice it if it would allow him to get a large enough port. So far, the port couldn't even be able to handle the 30 or so ships in its fleet. If nothing else, he wanted the port to be large enough to take care of the needs of hundreds of ships. Such an undertaking would definitely take a lot of time and wealth. But he was willing to do it if it meant that he would be able to challenge the Red Wines, the royal fleet, and the Ironborns in the future with a naval fleet of his own. Then there were also clock towers, public bathhouses, public toilets, public water faucets, and their plumbing and heating infrastructures. The clock towers would be a copy of Big Ben Clock Tower in London, but larger and higher. Its height would be around 500 feet in length. And with the addition of an observation room at the top to be able to recognize fires in the city or town in advance. It would be hard to make, but he would use magic discreetly at night to build them, if necessary. On the other hand, public bathhouses, public toilets, and public water faucets would be easier to build, but it was going to cost him a lot of money, especially the building plumbing system across the city and town. But it had to be done. Hygiene and public health were one of his primary concerns. In medieval times, a plague could wipe out kingdoms. Also, with a healthy body, his people's lifespan and work efficiency would improve and increase. So, it was a necessary long-term investment in his land. After all, one of the biggest empires in his past life, the Roman Empire, was famous for its public bathhouses. He didn't think this kind of empire would unnecessarily build bathhouses all over their empire. He also planned his bathhouses according to Roman bathhouses with a little Ottoman touch. Of course, plumbing and heating systems were more advanced than those buildings. Thanks to the knowledge he got from the book named Buildings and Construction, he already knew all kinds of buildings and their systems from his old world. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know where to start. But enough with his land and its development. Today was a special day for Dom Eric because his tattoo, the second-level symbol of Deathly Hallows, finally replenished its magic after a long time, and it was ready for another sacrifice. It has been a while since Dom Eric returned from the expedition of the True North. Since he upgraded his tattoo there, he has been waiting eagerly for this day. And finally, the time he awaited came. He was at Godwoods, sitting cross-legged at the foot of the heart tree of the castle while meditating. His level 2 tattoo had nearly replenished its magic, and he was about to get his first level 2 green rewards. Nothing happened unpredictably while he was waiting, and the symbol of Deathly Hallows had finally totally replenished. He sent his consciousness into his tattoo. From his experiments in the past, he knew that time would freeze in the outside world, and only his consciousness would go into the tattoo, not his body. So, he didn't need to worry about his body's safety. When he arrived at the endless void again, he looked around and saw 3 white orbs and 1 green orb. He was a little surprised by this sight. He expected that there would be only 2 white orbs and 1 green orb in this space. Shouldn't the number of low-level rewards be doubled, while 1 new level reward appears when the symbol rises to the 2nd level? Where did the 3rd white orb come from, he thought. But he couldn't get the answers he sought by standing, so he wished, and orbs floated toward him until they stopped in front of him. To find an answer to his recent question, he inspected white orbs first, and then he understood why there were 3 white orbs. One of the white orbs wasn't a new reward, but a reward from the last time when he came here. A book called Shoemaking. Well, as you can understand from the title of the book, It was a book containing all kinds of shoemaking techniques and methods. He didn't choose to get this reward last time, but his sacrifice gathered magic to upgrade the symbol. So, does this mean that rewards I didn't choose to get wouldn't be lost but accumulated here? If that is the case, it is good. I can get them in the future if I need them. He thought before looking at other white orbs. A book called Clothes and Fashion and a Bracer. He extends him toward them to gather their information. The book was about different kinds of clothes from different eras with their sewing methods from his past life. Well, it was good knowledge, but he didn't need it at the moment. It might be another good way to earn money, but he had already a lot of ongoing projects at the moment and didn't want to start a new project just for money and fashion. And most importantly, he didn't have any knowledge about creating fabric. And without different kinds of fabric, he couldn't make most of the clothes in the book. So, it was an unnecessary reward for him at the moment. But maybe he could get in the future if he needed it. As for the third white orb, it was a bracer. When he got information about the bracer, he realized it wasn't a just bracer, but a hidden weapon. A hidden blade that can be released with a wrist move. It was a cool tool for an assassin, but it was useless to him. After all, if he wanted to kill someone secretly, he could do it magic and nobody would know it. But this is the first time I have seen something different from books as rewards. Does that mean I can get items as well from now on? Is it because of the upgrade? Probably. Anyway, I will know in the future. For now, let's see the main reward. And finally, he looked at the green orb, the level 2 reward. He extended his hand towards it and information about the reward flowed into his mind. It was a book called Flying Magical Items, which included different kinds of craftsmanship methods and runic enchantments to craft flying items. The magical ones. The book also included different types of spells and charms that should or could be used on flying objects. He is disappointed. It was a good reward. He could make a flying broomstick for himself now. Maybe a firebolt or an even more advanced broomstick than a firebolt. But he expected more advanced rewards. This reward was just another book that included some knowledge, albeit a magical one. After all, his ultimate goal was to resurrect his parents and his loved ones from his past life. How many times did he have to upgrade his tattoo to get that reward with this kind of improvement? I should have known it wouldn't be easy. Looks like I have to upgrade the symbol many more times to get there. With a depressed mood, he grabbed the green orb and left the endless void. At least with this reward, he didn't need to constantly apparate to reach a new location that he'd never been to before while traveling. A broomstick would make his future journeys easier. Outside of the Dreadfort Castle, POV of Villager Tom. Tom reached the final line and ran a little distance more before he fell to the ground in exhaustion. His muscles burned with an intensity that he had never felt before, and he felt like retching out all the food he ate in the morning. And he was thirsty. Oh, so thirsty. Someone suddenly passed him a cup of water. He looked up with some difficulty and realized that it was a boy who was giving water to all the participants. He murmured a quick thanks, gulped down the water as quickly as possible, and gave it back to the boy who moved on in order to quench the thirst of the other participants. He looked around him to find how many people had arrived and found that only 100 or so many people had completed the race so far. Thank the gods. It at least meant that he would pass this round. They had started the day with some 4,000 men who arrived outside Dreadfort in order to join the army. Of those, quite a few were disqualified because of their lack of height and unhealthy bodies. Of the ones that were left, they had to go through a lot more exercises, like pushing himself off the ground 30 times with his hands and pulling himself up on a bar a dozen times. In the end, the selected participants were all told to run a long path that was created especially for them. They were told that only the top 500 people who arrived at the finishing line would be selected for the army. And he had clearly arrived among the top 500. He was sure of it even if he didn't know the numbers. He had no idea why they were told to run like this, but he was sure that the men under Lord Bolton knew what they were doing. As he finally stood up despite all the protest of his leg, he saw that more and more men were arriving at the finish line with each passing minute, and was glad that at least he would be selected for the army. Now he just hoped that he wouldn't have to run so much every day once he joined the army. However, he did wonder how their instructors would train them in order to prepare them for the wars. Sir Mormont recently sold some prisoners as slaves. Lord Stark found out about this, and when he went to dispense justice, he ran off with his wife while bankrupting the Mormont family. His new spy mistress informed him, and he took a moment to absorb the information he had just heard. Ser Jorah Mormont, the person who earned his knighthood from the king after the battle at Pike, and then won the jousting competition in Lannisport, as well as the hand of that Hightower girl there, he asked, and his spy mistress nodded. What would promote him to sell men to slavers? And how did he bankrupt his family? He asked curiously. His wife had expensive tastes, the spy mistress said with a deadpan look, and he looked incredulously at the woman for a long moment before he burst into laughter. Wow, I've heard about husbands being devoted to their wives, but to think that he bankrupted his whole house in order to impress his wife. He said and shook his head, not liking this Mormont fella at all. Do you want me to put a bounty on his head? His spy mistress asked, and he shook his head. No. The life of a disgraced knight who has lost his home will be harder for him than a quick death. Plus, how long will his wife remain with him now that he doesn't have any money to spend on her? He said with a snort. Not to mention that it would be improper for me to put a bounty on him, as he didn't belong to the Bolton house. After that, they sat in silence in his solar as he wondered what he should do next. Lord Jorah Mormont left Bear Island to serve the Night's Watch a few years ago. So, who is running the Bear Island right now? He asked, remembering the stoic old man who had greeted him at Castle Black. Jorah Mormont's sister Meage Mormont, his spy mistress informed. A woman, he asked with some amusement. After all, men in Westeros tended to think that women were only good for running household duties and nothing else. But if there are no other men left in House Mormont to run the house, then such a thing would be understandable. House Mormont's women are said to be fierce warriors, his spy mistress said, and he gave a nod in return. If his people are constantly harassed by the wildlings from the north and Iron Islanders from the south, then the women within his lands would learn how to wield an axe as well. You need to adapt in order to survive. Send them 20 plows, 20 seed drills, 40 oxen, and 4 bags of HYV seeds. He said, My lord, she asked with some surprise. Did I stutter? He asked with some amusement as she shook her head calmly. No, but you've never given the high-yielding variety seeds to anyone else, she pointed out, and he shrugged. I'm feeling charitable today, he said. Left unsaid was the fact that the Boltons had a rather bad reputation thanks to the actions of his ancestors, and he wanted to change that reputation within his lifetime. He was already preparing some luxury gifts for the houses at North, but it would be better if could help some of them when they were in need. I'll see it done, but I'm afraid that they won't accept charity. The people of Bear Island might be bankrupt and desperate for help, but they have a fierce pride of their own. She informed him, and he nodded. If they don't accept it as charity, then simply tell them to pay me back when they have enough wealth of their own. He said, and don't charge them too much as it would defeat the purpose of helping them. The spy mistress gave a bow, and he expected her to leave, but when she didn't, he looked at her with a questioning glance. The whaler ships that we sent out in order to hunt the whales in the Shivering Sea got interference from the Ibbenese people. That is understandable. He said, the Ibbenese people have a monopoly on the whaling business and wouldn't like it if someone else interfered with it. I'm guessing you already know how to deal with this problem? She asked, and he gave a nod. Send Merlin to hunt down anyone who tries to interfere with my ships. He said, tell him to take the new war galleys that the shipwrights from the Lannisport and Iron Islands made. You mean the war galleys that they made with your designs? She asked with some amusement, and he gave a nod. Yes, Merlin is an excellent captain and should be able to deal with them on his own. But if he fails, then I'll go to Ibn and deal with this situation myself. His spy mistress nodded and bowed her head to him before leaving the solar. As she left the room, he sat down on his rotating chair and looked outside the castle where the men were digging the foundation of the building which would serve as a school for his people. His men had already bought learned slaves from across the Essos to his lands. By now, he had more than 200 people within his lands who were literate, and he was already putting them to good use by giving them administrative work or having them teach the new generation of his citizens. The blackboards and chalk that he invented, as well as the new books printed by the printing press, helped matters as well. Now he just needed to deal with the bandits and poachers that had propped up in his lands. I don't like this, His aunt murmured anxiously as she paced back and forth across the room, while he was stoically looking outside the window, where a large procession of 1,300 wildling people was being taken to one of the empty pastures that he had selected for them at an earlier date. "I know, but it is done. Worrying about it won't change anything," he said with a shrug, although he was slightly worried about how anxious she seemed about this whole affair. After all, he did love her like a mother. He never had and didn't want to cause her too much trouble. They're wildlings. She cursed while looking at them, though all he could see were some desperate people who were running from the others. After reading the minds of some of the people, he was sure that they believed the undead were rising beyond the wall. Undeads who had bright blue eyes and didn't die even if you tore them in half. But none of them had ever seen a White Walker, so he still wasn't sure of their existence. Though in his heart, he knew that they existed. The problem was that he couldn't just go around telling such things to the other lords, as it would cause too much panic among them. He looked outside, and where his aunt saw these cursed wildlings, he just saw children, women, old people, and a few men. When he had gone to Hardhome with his small fleet in order to fulfill the promise he had given to Mance Raider, he had found more than 2,100 people waiting for him on the shores, as well as Mance Raider and Tormund Giantsbane. Those 2,100 free folks were being led by 6 different leaders. Unfortunately, 2 of them were lying to him and had no intention of settling down quietly within his lands. They instead planned to pillage his lands and go further south to find safety. He had denied them the passage to his lands, telling Mance Raider about their true intentions. A fight almost broke out right then and there, as the 2 leaders refused to accept his decision. But Mance Raider was finally able to calm everything down, and Domeric was able to bring the remaining 1,300 free folks to his lands, but not before all the leaders promised to follow the law and not harm other men and women in his lands. Thankfully, Merlin was capable of braving the sea without sailing near the seashores, so the men from the East Watch didn't find out about his secret trip to Hardhome. Now, he just had to make sure that other people wouldn't find out about him harboring free folks within his lands. But even if they did, it was not like there was any law against doing such a thing. And if it came to war, then he already had a standing army of 1,300 men, with 1,000 more being trained in a hidden place. Not to mention the levies that he'll be able to raise, the giants, and the wards that would fight for him if someone tried to challenge him. Though admittedly, he would rather have peace than see his men fight a meaningless battle. After all, if White Walkers were real, then that meant when the time came, they had to fight against an undead army that had maybe millions of soldiers. And to fight against that kind of army, the whole North or whole Westeros had to combine their power and resources. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a North or Westeros in the future. So, there shouldn't be unnecessary disputes in the North, at least till they won against the others. Also, he didn't want to conquer the North or Westeros with an army and bloodshed. The land of Bolton was on par in size with the small countries of his old world. If these lands could be used efficiently, they could accommodate millions of people. So, his priority was to improve and develop his land to make it a self-sufficient land. Of course, there were some resources that he didn't have in his lands, but he could get them from others peacefully for now, till he could find these resources somewhere else and make them his own permanently. After all, he wasn't a normal person, but a wizard who could cast magic. And a lot of incredible things could be achieved with magic. I thought I could develop my lands peacefully, but looks like I need to prepare for a war against the others. Shouldn't my second life be more peaceful? Why would I have to fight against the undeads from a legend? He looked outside where there were free folks again. He thought that accepting those people was the right choice. Otherwise, they would die at the hands of others, rise as undead, and join the undead army. I need more soldiers, more blacksmiths, more generals, more craftsmen. I need more people. That was Domeric's primary problem since he became a lord. He didn't have enough man. In the past, that was still okay, but now with the danger from the true North, the clock began ticking for him, for the North, or maybe for the whole world. Should I get some slaves from free cities at Essos and free them when they arrive in my lands? No, not now. I don't have a strong army at the moment. What if the slaves decided to rebel after even they were free from slavery? They did it Essos after all in the past. I can get some slaves, but not too many. But that way I still can't get enough people for my lands. He thought of luring people from other lords' lands, but lords and Lord Stark definitely wouldn't allow that. After all, people were also a resource for them. He could try to buy people from them, but they might sell him some, but definitely not so much. But what about he didn't lure people from other lands, but small folks came to his lands themselves willingly? Yes, that could be done easily. Of course, he would lure them, but not openly. He could send some people to other lands to praise Bolton Land's prosperity discreetly. When the lords realized that somehow lots of their people migrated to Bolton Lands, they couldn't do anything about it anymore. They would probably demand justice from Lord Stark, but could Lord Stark punish him because he was good at developing his land? No way. Well, most Domeric would give them some gold to shut their mouth. This is a good opportunity. This way I can give some funds to other houses to improve their land. If we want to fight against the others, we have to unite our strength and resources. But northern houses is too poor and prideful. If I want to give them gold, they will reject it flatly. But if I gave them some compensation, they would accept while smiling, right? Killing 2 birds with 1 stone was always enjoyable. Domeric sat quietly on a chair while looking over the training of his 1,000 men in the hidden location. Verimer, Briar, and Orell sat beside him and looked over at the hundreds of drawings in front of them. These were the drawings of all the animals, birds, and other living beings that could be controlled by a warg. He had promised them any animal or bird that they desired since they had worked very hard for the past year, and he wanted to reward them for their hard work. After a long moment, Verimer stood up from his place. He gave him a piece of paper that he selected from the pile and said, "I want this." He looked at the paper and found it looked like a Komodo dragon from his past life. It was much larger and had 6 legs to support its weight. "You want a basilisk?" he asked. "I want this." "Yes." Verimer replied without any preamble, and he gave a nod. Then Verimer left along with the dozens of animals that he was now able to control with his will. After he had left, Briar stood up from her seat and gave him a paper. It had the drawing of a brown-belly wyvern, and Domeric whistled in appreciation. "Good choice. You do realize that it will be very hard for me to find and bring you this wyvern, right? And even if I bring it here, there's a small chance that you might not be able to control it with your warging abilities. Do you want to take this risk?" he asked, and Briar nodded with a mischievous smile. "I won't fail," she said confidently before she climbed onto a horse and left along with the dozens of ravens that she had started to control on her own. In the end, Orell gave him a diagram as well, and Domeric gave a sigh upon looking at it. "A shadow wing wyvern. Can't say I fault your choice," he said with a thin smile. After all, these wyverns were the largest of their kind, and they only came out to hunt in the dark. This meant that even finding one of them was going to be difficult for people, let alone capture it, which meant that he'd have to go to the Sithorios personally if he wanted to keep his promise to his wargs. "You promised," Orell said with a frown, and he gave a nod. "Yes, that I did, but I'll only be able to bring you a smaller one, as the larger ones won't fit in a ship. You understand?" Orell bristled at being given a small wyvern instead of a full adult one, but he knew better than to test his patience and gave a short bow and left. Once they had left, his spy mistress, a talented woman he had bought in lists, approached him. "My lord, most of the wood and plants that you asked for have finally arrived in Dreadfort." He raised an eyebrow at that bit of news. After he got the book called Flying Magical Items, he wanted to create a flying broom for himself so that he could travel to places that he had not seen before. But selecting the proper wood for it was important, so he had asked his subordinates to bring him all the wood from the different kinds of trees that were present in Westeros. Actually, the book included knowledge about different kinds of wood or any other materials that are needed to create flying items. But knowing and experiencing were not the same thing. He did not know whether the trees in his old world and the trees with the same name or similar trees in this world had the same characteristics. There were also tree species in this world that did not exist in the old world. So, he wanted to experiment with wood from different trees from this world and asked his people to gather them. and it seemed that his order was finally here. "Thank you for informing me, Lyra. I will check them later. You can go back to your business if nothing else," he said, and she gave him a short bow, which clearly showed him all the right curves. "As you wish, my lord. Then I will go back to my business," she said with a mischievous smile and left. Once she had left, he once again gazed at the men training in the field up ahead and wondered how long it would take before they were able to learn proper discipline. He wanted to create a disciplined army, not a group of people who could fight personally but knew nothing about organizing, collective action, and discipline. The strength of an army comes from its ability to organize itself quickly and to act collectively according to its orders. Otherwise, there would be no difference between them and headless chickens. Because of that, he was inspecting the training of his army from time to time. He wanted the instructors and soldiers to feel his presence and not to slack in their training. But still, things are going slowly. Should I buy some unsullied from Astapor? It would create mayhem in the north if the lords found that I created an unsullied army. Even King wouldn't be silent about it. They would probably think that I was preparing for a rebellion against the north to become a Red King. He thought as he watched his men train and tried to find a solution to his dilemma. If lords of the north see a white walker or a white with their own eyes, that would change everything, right? Lord Stark is like a brother to the king. So, if he tells the king about the other, the king will probably believe him. And while the king and the lords in the north worry about the danger at their door, they shouldn't say anything about him expanding his standing army and buying an unsullied army from Essos. They even might be happy about it. After a while, he completed his thoughts. But that means I need to go beyond the wall and bring back a white or white walker. Is there another expedition to the true north in the future? He thought while letting out a sigh. Dom Eric was in his port town at the mouth of the Weeping Water River and was looking at the construction of his new shipbuilding factory at the moment. A few days ago, he apparat to Bravos and took a good look at the large bookstore at first. The bookstore belonged to him, and it sold books that were produced by his printing press. It was the largest bookstore in Bravos, and he opened similar bookstores in some of the other free cities, as well as King's Landing and Gulltown Vale. Even though the literacy rate was really low in this world, there were still lords and their castle folk, merchants, maesters, and other rich or well-educated people. So, the sales were going well. Of course, it couldn't be compared to sales from bookstores in his old world, but he already had other plans for the stores. At the moment, they were selling only books, but in time he would sell other things at the stores in the future, like his board games and other inventions of him. After a few years, when people entered his stores, they would think that they had come to a different world, especially when he started selling the stuff from his last reward. A while ago, he got another level 2 green reward from the symbol of Deathly Hallows. Just like before, he was disappointed about the reward. It was a book called Alchemy Owls. As the title suggests, it was a book about how to produce magic owls with alchemy. It was a good reward, but it wasn't necessary for him. After all, he had his magical mirrors and gave them to people from his inner circle already. As for contacting other houses, there were still ravens that were tamed at the Citadel by maesters. But it wasn't totally useless. Although ravens could carry messages to castles, keeps, and other places, they could only go forth and back at the same route that they tamed for. And they could carry only small missives and letters. Owls, on the other hand, could carry larger letters and deliver messages anywhere and to anyone as long as they were given a name. So, he thought he could create alchemy owls in the future for his castle's communication needs. And he could sell the owls at his bookstores to create another income for himself. If he did that, then he wouldn't need the ravens in the future, which also meant he wouldn't need Citadel's help anymore. And becoming independent in another thing would bring him one step closer to his goals. After checking up on the bookstore, he went to the Iron Bank and returned the 100,000 gold dragons as well as the interest. Not that he ever used the wealth that he borrowed from them, but appearances needed to be kept. After that, the Iron Bank showed interest in buying the printing press from him, and he would have been willing to sell them the old version of the printing press because a new model of printing press was already produced by his people. But Iron Bank wanted an exclusive trade deal for it, so he refused. After all, once he started selling his printing press, he would sell it to as many people as possible so that literacy could spread in the world. And even then, he would only sell the old models to others. After all, why should he give away the advantage that he obtained with great difficulty to others? So, selling them solely to the Bravosi people would defeat that purpose. After that, the deal fell through. But they were still interested in buying the armor and weapons made up of frost steel and placed a large order, which he had no reason to decline. Not like he was short of money, but working on too many projects was burning too much money, and he would rather not steal any more gold from the others, as it was a bad strategy in the long term. After all, others needed money to buy his products, right? But maybe he could visit some bad people to borrow some money from them. Of course, his only purpose would be to put money into circulation, nothing else. Once he left the Iron Bank, he went to check up on the main reason why he came to Bravos. And the main reason was the shipbuilding factory in Bravos that was capable of building one war galley in a single day during wartime. He had a lot of shipwrights in his lands, as well as a lot of engineers and builders. So, he decided that instead of having them build ships of their own, one by one, he would rather create a whole new factory where they would all be able to work in unison and produce better results. So he spent the next few days noting down all the details of the shipbuilding factory, something that he wouldn't have been able to do if he hadn't been a wizard. But in the end, he was able to take careful notes of every single procedure and was sure that his men would be able to create such a factory within half a year. And even if his shipwrights were not as experienced as these men from Bravos, they would still be able to produce better ships with the new ship designs that he had in his hand. With that done, he returned to Dreadfort and started the construction of the shipbuilding factory at the mouth of the Weeping Water River, where the port was being built. Because of all the construction work going on in his lands, more and more people were arriving from different parts of Westeros. But he had a feeling that with the way he was starting new projects every day, he would never have enough manpower under him. After all, the idea of building the grandest library in the whole world was still just an idea that would take some time for him to create. He would probably start its construction by the end of the year once the builders have completed the other projects and are able to start building the library, which would even put the Citadel to shame.